Well, September is over, October is here, and I got one question for you.
Do you remember?
What's up, flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. There were plenty of movies in September that I did not put out a review for on this channel, but don't worry, I've watched a few of them, but I haven't watched all of them. Let me know, what movie did I miss in September, and what is your ranking of the films this month? I've seen 14 new releases, so we're gonna do that. As always, if you want to show your support for this channel, the best way to do that is dropping that little like button, man. You don't know how much that helps these videos, so for everyone that does, thank you. For everyone that doesn't, what am I doing wrong?
Everything!
Don't answer that. The first movie we're starting with is Equalizer 3, or Sequelizer, or Threequalizer, with Denzel Washington. And honestly, looking back at this franchise, after the second movie, I was out. I said I didn't like this one. I don't know where they go from here. I love Denzel. I don't care to see him on screen again, but what are you going to do with the story? But I love what they did with the third film. They make it to where he's a guy, he's out of the game, he's retired, but you know, he still has the skills, he still has the ability to be a badass character. And he takes you on this journey in this third movie. And really, I mean, I know it's an obvious thing to say, Denzel Washington makes this film, but come on, he is incredible in this movie. I love the fact that he scales it back just a bit, but it's almost more menacing and threatening, the subtlety in his voice when he's saying these crazy things. And this town that he's become so attached to, and you really get to feel that at the beginning of the film. Now, I don't know if the movie does a very good job of getting you attached to anyone else, but you care about Denzel Washington, you care about his attachment, his connection, and thus you get some cool action sequences. Although I will say, fewer and farther in between than maybe I wanted. You do have some dull moments in this movie, so it's definitely not great, but I didn't expect really anything from Threequalizer. And I'm going to put it on the okay tier, but just know I thought about putting it on the good tier. Next up, it's Expendables 4, or Expendables. I didn't do a review for this. I actually wasn't going to see it in theaters, but Saturday rolled around. You get bored. You don't have anything else to do. You're a movie critic, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go watch a movie. Let's go watch Expendables. What was this? What was this movie? This is the most bland and dull attempt to capitalize on a somewhat successful franchise and bring us a sequel that said, we're going to be R-rated this time. Okay, cool, but you have to give us something. You have to give us something to care about, characters to connect to, and you are already connected to this cast. That's why this movie baffles me, is you had everything in place from the prior three films, and I don't even love this franchise, but this is such a step down from every other movie in this franchise. You botch the execution, you give us the most bland and dull, seemingly obvious story possible, and characters that all you have to do is make them just as likable as you made them in the other few movies, but you give them nothing to do, nothing to say of significance other than Stallone at the beginning saying, oh, hey, ho, we're family. Where have I heard that before?
I don't have friends.
Some actors coming in, and really people that were already involved, that are just sleepwalking through this film. A big action sequence to start things off, but it's so unmemorable. You have one action sequence in the film that's actually pretty well done, pretty well thought out, but that is the only thing of significance in this film that I remotely cared about. This was a disastrous sequel from start to finish, and I think the biggest problem here is it's so bland all the way around. Performances, characters, acting. Should I go on? Probably not, but I will.
This is a disaster!
I love Stallone. I love Statham. I could go down the cast list and say, I love this person. I love this person. Couple people in there. Why are they in this film? I don't care. And they're sleepwalking, and everybody's sleepwalking, and I was sleeping. I wasn't sleeping, but I wanted to sleep. I want to sleep just thinking about it. I hated this movie. I'm putting it on the awful tier. Ooh. Next up, Wes Anderson. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. I really had a nice time with this film. This is basically a stage play come to life on screen, and I mean it. The way that they go through this set and the production design and the transitions from scene to scene, It's coming to life in a beautiful way. The color scheme, I mean, do I really have to say all of the things that make a Wes Anderson movie good? Because it feels like it's very consistent. Even if I don't love the story in all of his movies, that part is always consistent. But he did some different things with the framing here on occasion and gave us a bit of a different visual flair at times, which was nice, but it worked for what it had to do. What I really liked about this movie is the fact that you have a very simple cast, including Ralph Fiennes, Ben Kingsley, Dev Patel, and of course Benedict, playing multiple characters at the same time, and it works. And this story, while not the most interesting Roald Dahl story I've ever seen, but it works for what it's trying to do and be. There's an emotional attachment you have specifically to two characters that I have in mind, and really some of the things that these actors were doing, Dev Patel specifically, but that Cumberbatch and Wes Anderson connection, I still haven't watched the other shorter shorts. I'm putting this on the list because it's just a bit longer. I understand it's technically a short film, but I'm putting it on the list because I thought it was a good little movie, and I'm putting it on this good little tier. The Creator from Gareth Edwards. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the fall. If you watched that video, you knew how excited I was for this. And the things that I really wanted to worked really well. The visuals, the fact that you take like what did they say, an $80 million budget, and you gave us that. That's phenomenal. Viscerally, visually, visual effects-wise, everything you want to see, and really everything you want to hear. I thought the sound design was amazing. Hans Zimmer's score, more of an in-context type of thing. I'm not going to go listen to it on the radio, but it's really good. My issues, and you know my issues, you watched the review. If you didn't watch the review, shame on you. I don't blame you. John David Washington, a little bit of an emotionally distant character for me. There are two relationships in particular where I was really supposed to feel something from those, and I just didn't. And then you have the story, which conceptually is actually great, but there's so much detail within that story, and to cram it all in 2 hours, it felt like a difficult thing to do to start, but then the execution of cramming everything in there just didn't quite work because there's so many moments where they had the opportunity to go in depth, but they don't do any detail here. Instead, they take all of that detail and focus on other things that, frankly, I didn't care as much about. And I also cared about a lot of the things happening in the background more than I did the main story. That's never good, but the main story on paper, I think works. I think there's a great movie in here somewhere, but the execution of the writing, the story, some of the dialogue didn't quite work. But I will say, if you're going to see it on the biggest screen possible, because in IMAX, this movie is visually stunning. I'm still going to put it on the okay tier just because I had a really great time in the theater. I just didn't feel what I needed to feel.
That's what she said.
Shah Rukh Khan, Jawan. This is a massive Indian film, and everybody's always requesting, Austin, you got to review this movie, that movie, this movie. Indian cinema is very prevalent in my comment section. So I saw this one, was at the theater near me, and I said, I have to go check it out because everybody's talking about Shah Rukh Khan, how this is a return to form, and I don't have a lot of context prior to this film, just a few performances. But I can see why they're saying that, because this is an awesome performance, playing multiple characters, a grand story. The return at the beginning of this film, the prologue of sorts, was just, oh my God, it was awesome. The action sequences, the music, the way it all comes together. Indian cinema is always an experience on the big screen, especially because I watched it the second day it was out. And that theater was packed, and it was crazy, and I was having a great time. And the experience is what makes this a good movie. That being said, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's one of the best movies of the year, one of the greatest action films of the... And the action is amazing, but I did think they were trying to do too much. Once again, a similar critique to what I had with The Creator. Doing too much with the story and trying to get us to have these connections to a bunch of side characters that have very small roles, and they're delegated to the background when they should have had a little bit more to do to make us try to connect. So that was my issue with it. That's what keeps it from being a great film, but I'm still going to put this on the good tier because I had a good time with it. All right, let's talk about a movie that nobody is talking about. I didn't do a review for it because I watched it a little late. This is A Million Miles Away, starring Michael Pena. And Michael Pena, always delivering on the comedic performances, but once again in 2023, we have this behind-the-scenes movie showcasing the life of someone who actually existed, and the story that I didn't know hardly anything about is really just interesting, engaging, heartfelt. It's a nice, solid, easy to watch, emotionally resonant story that you can put a lot of stock into, because apparently a lot of this was based on real life. So in that way, it's kind of beautiful. It focuses on this migrant farm worker who defies all odds to become a NASA astronaut, and he wants to go to space. He's determined to do anything it takes to do that. But he's just a really good person. Supporting cast is solid as well. Rosa Salazar was really great as kind of that love interest at the beginning, and then the route that this story goes, it makes you feel good. It puts a smile on your face. There's one scene where, he's talking to someone later in his life that had an impact on him as a kid, and I'm like, I got a little bit emotional. It's so cheesy. This movie is cheesy. I'm not going to BS you there. It didn't do anything that I haven't seen before, but sometimes you get that warm, fuzzy feeling while you're watching a film, and I got that while watching A Million Miles Away. So, shock of the month. I'm putting this one on the good tier. Next up, Apple TV Plus, Flora and Son, John Carney. This was a very anticipated movie of mine for the fall. I was really excited to see what it was going to deliver, and I thought it was good. Now, when I look at John Carney's filmography, obviously Sing Street, one of the greatest movies of all time. It's in my top 10 movies. I love it so much, and everything about it is amazing. And really, the rest of his filmography is amazing, too. Once and Begin Again. So I was expecting Flora and Son to be on that level. And for me, after thinking about it for about a week or two, it's not. I think it's a good film. I believe there are a lot of really good moments in here. The music is nice. Not as good as the rest of his filmography, and that romantic relationship between our main character and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's in there, is solid and sweet, but it didn't do as much for me as I wanted it to do. The story itself is good, and it's one that's going to resonate. You have this mom, and she's trying to reel in her teenage son who just keeps causing trouble, so they decide that music is something that's going to bring them together, and she wants to learn how to play the guitar. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is teaching her how to play the guitar. That relationship's nice. The relationship with her son is, up and down, obviously, but it means a lot to the film. And all in all, this was just a good experience, a really good experience. But I did want more from it, and then the way that it ends, I'm sitting there like, there's something missing. I can't put a finger on it, but there's something missing that keeps this from being great. So my expectations were high, a little disappointed here. That being said, putting it on the good tier. And the exact same can be said for Dumb Money. Craig Gillespie is a really good director. This cast... Paul Dano, Shailene Woodley, Pete Davidson, America Ferrera, Anthony Ramos, Nick Offerman, Sebastian Stan, Seth Rogen, Vincent D'Onofrio. That's a big cast. And it's a fascinating true story. Dano plays Keith Gill, who puts everything he has into GameStop's stock. And this is a true story. This happened a couple of years ago. And all of a sudden, this internet... well, really a group on Reddit, but this internet presence, everybody starts putting money into this stock, and it starts to rise, and he's got this going, and the memes come, and the internet's all on the same side, and they're going up against the big, spineless billionaires who control the stock market. You see where I'm going with this? It's like this revolution type feeling while you're watching the movie. And not everyone comes out in the green, but it is a great story to pay attention to. The issues that I had with Dumb Money seem pretty simple on their surface, but it's issues that, again, this is an ongoing theme in September, kept this movie from being great. There are like 5 different perspectives and stories at play in Dumb Money. And you think about that and you're like, this could really work. And you could obviously make the Wolf of Wall Street comparison. You could make, there have been countless films that deal with this type of story, but also handle it in a similar way, but I think this film takes a little too much on, and there are a lot of elements on the plate that it never quite fully pays off on. I do think the pacing wasn't the worst in Dumb Money, but occasionally you're just trying to figure out who I need to focus on, and there is a point in the film where they go away from Paul Dano's character for quite a while, and I'm like, man, I feel like this is a little too long here. You're taking the focal point of the film and you're kind of putting it in the background. I don't know if I like that. That being said, as an experience and the fact that all of these viewpoints and perspectives, first of all, played by an amazing cast, but they're also really fascinating, that made it a fun movie to watch. Dumb Money is fun. Just make sure when you're watching in the theater like I did, the sound design works, because I had to go get somebody in the theater and say, hey, why is the music really loud? And the voices are so quiet. Why is that happening? And they fixed it.
Eventually.
Dumb Money goes on the good tier, by the way. This is worth a watch. Next up, a movie I just talked about on this channel. It's Reptile. Benicio del Toro, Alicia Silverstone, Justin Timberlake.
Oh, that was so stupid.
Yeah, Timberlake's fine in this film. Silverstone, she's fine in this movie. I think all of these side performances are just okay. They don't really add a lot to the movie. I think there are some that are just, they're almost cameos. Those were really good. But it's Benicio del Toro. I wanted this, and you go into every crime drama with this mentality, but I wanted it to be like, well, obviously Del Toro. Sicario? Is it going to be like a David Fincher type film? We're solving this murder mystery. Are we going to have that feeling of like gruesomeness and grimness, but give this payoff and have the shock factor in there? And while the murder itself is somewhat interesting in the beginning, there are just too many things happening that made me say, okay, well, I either saw that coming, or when we get that big shocking moment, it's just not that shocking, or it's just not that interesting. And I thought this story became more convoluted as it went, but I like the atmosphere. I like the way that this movie captures that grimness. I thought the look of it worked for what it was trying to be. It does somewhat have a bit of a Fincher feel in that way, and Del Toro, in a better movie, in a better setting, would be an Oscar-nominated actor for this role. I'm not kidding. He's that good. But the movie itself, and really the script, it's not going to quite get him there. So I'm going to put this on the okay tier, an okay experience on Netflix.
I mean, it's all right. Like,
no one's going to save you. No one was going to save me from giving this movie just an okay review. After everybody and their grandma, the first reactions were saying, oh my God, it's Steven Spielberg. What a masterpiece. And that's okay. I think there are a lot of elements of this film that could make people feel that way. My issues come with a very slow start. I didn't mind the commitment to little talking. If you don't know what this movie's about, no one will save you. It's basically a home invasion movie with an alien. So it's just an alien invasion movie. That's pretty simple. And I'm watching this thinking, Caitlin Dever is giving an outstanding performance here. But, there's not much more to this other than the home invasion aspect, which is very simple. And like I said, no dialogue. And then they try to fit in this backstory here that was interesting. And admittedly, it made the movie better as it went. And as you get more into the eeriness and the creepiness of it all, the alien elements are really cool. So the movie started to work more and more for me. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of digging this. I'm kind of into this. And then the ending happens. And I think I know what happened. I mean, it's up in the air. You could debate it all you want. But it's just, for me, it felt like a bit of a cop-out because something happens about 10 minutes before that. And I'm like, man, the decision to end the movie there instead of where they actually end it, to me, is a better decision. Unfortunately, they just kept going. It didn't quite work for me. So all in all, some really cool elements. Dever's performance and what they do with the alien invasion itself, but it's just an okay movie. How about A Haunting in Venice? I think this franchise prior to this film is just the most okay, average. Oh, another Murder on the Orient Express is coming out this year. Let's see who the cast is. Oh, the cast is pretty good. But there's always something wrong with these films, it seems like, well, at least the first two movies. You either have a great cast with great performances and a lackluster mystery, or a more interesting mystery and a cast that's just not as good. Talking to you, second movie. So I was just kind of like, okay, let's see what this one does. To my surprise, this is the best cast that they've had, the best performances that they've given. It's the slowest of the three movies and probably the least entertaining from a comedic standpoint, all of this, and Braun is not as funny, jokey in this film. but it's the most interesting story, and I love the fact that they added a horror element to it. This is kind of a horror movie, which is really cool, and the way that it goes, a little predictable here and there, but this is the most invested I've been in a single film in this franchise, and I actually walked out saying that's the most memorable movie of the franchise, so I have no choice but to put this one on the good tier. Haunting in Venice worked for me. It lives inside. Some really good things in It Lives Inside. Megan Surrey gives a nice performance. I think the idea of unleashing this demon and having it inside of this jar. I still have the jar from the review. You remember that in the review? You remember it's an Easter egg. It's like a Marvel Easter egg. Woo!
It lives inside.
That sounds like Bane.
Hello! I was born in it. Molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was a younger man, and by then it was blinding.
Yeah, I think the story's just too familiar here. There are a couple of scares in here that are well put together. I think the lighting in this film specifically works extremely well, and once we get to see, I don't want to give specifics, but some of these visual effects are quite good. But they do a bit of a reveal early on in the film, and then when they try to keep things in the shadows, it's just not as scary as I wanted it to be. I wanted to feel the fear with this film. And I like the main performance. I think there are some elements, culturally speaking, that work extremely well in this movie. But all in all, this was a big missed opportunity, and I just wasn't a fan. So It Lives Inside on the bad tier. The Nun 2, Too Many Nuns, Too None Too Furious. Tessa Farmiga as our main character is once again really compelling. She also looks just like her sister. The Farmiga sisters own this franchise. She is by far the best part of this movie, and the investigative aspect of her story is really interesting. And there's also the side of the story with all of the kids and the demon coming after them, and of course the nun, when we get that reveal, oh my God, it's the nun. We know what the nun looks like. Now, some of the reveals in this film, one in particular involving a bunch of newspapers, that was actually really clever. And I think The Nun 2 is way more clever than its predecessor. And honestly, the quality, even the story, is better than the first. You also get this shock factor moment at the beginning where I'm like, oh my God, that was actually really cool. But as it goes, it drags, and the pacing and everything I don't like about the Conjuring franchise makes its way into this movie. Not as bad as some of the other lame spin-offs, but it's still somewhat of a lame spin-off. A sequel to that, it is going on the meh tier. It's just very unmemorable. And finally, Saw X, possibly one of my least anticipated movies of the month, and a movie when I was looking at the list of fall films, I'm like, who cares? It's another Saw movie. We don't need this. Who needs this? I'm not even a huge fan of this franchise. Really, just the first two films. And I was wrong. This is a really good sequel. And if you're comparing it to the other sequels in this franchise, it's a great sequel. It's one of those movies that catches you so off guard. I love the fact that they put it right in between the first and the second film. My two favorites in the franchise, but they give us a story that almost outweighs, in terms of how compelling it is, the traps. I liked the story as much as I liked the traps. I like Tobin Bell's performance better than anything else in this movie, and it's his best performance of the franchise so far. The rest of the cast, nobody that's too memorable. The focus this time is not on the people in the traps as much, even though you get a little bit here and there, and there's one in particular that you kind of care for. There's a relationship that starts, and the people on both sides of the glass, you don't truly know what they're going to do next, even though you can look at John Kramer and say, well, yeah, he's going to kill people, and he does, in entertaining fashion. Some really good traps in this film. Maybe not the best I've seen of the franchise, but some really good ones. And the notable one that's on the poster, first of all, the way they do that was cool. But again, I look at the way this movie starts, and it takes a while to get there, but I'm still invested. I'm like, we're taking it's a long build-up to get to these traps, but I still care. And the way they kind of make me care was, yeah, this movie caught me off guard, man. I can't believe it was as entertaining as it was, even though it's so simple with its story, but that works in its benefit. It's less convoluted than a lot of the other sequels. Now, I'm debating, what tier do I put this on? Do I truly believe it's a really great movie? I don't know, but I think it's such a great sequel, such an unexpected film. I didn't think I was going to like this at all. I think in this moment, my brain wants me to put it on the great tier, and you know what? I'm going to do it. Officially a fan of Saw, at least this film, and it might just be my favorite in the franchise. As always, before I rank these, let me know if you like these videos, if you want to see one next month, and did I forget a film? And what are you looking forward to in October? At the bottom, it's pretty obvious. It's Sylvester Stallone. And then you have the bad tier, of course, the mad tier, yeah, none your business. At the bottom of the okay tier, let's go Reptile, and right above that, now here's where I struggle. I think for the surprise factor of No One Will Save You, I'm going to put that ever so slightly above the creator. And at the top, obviously, is Equalizer 3 or Threequalizer on the good tier. Let's go A Million Miles Away, followed by Henry, Sugar, and then we have Jawan almost right in the middle. Haunting in Venice, big surprise, looks good right there. And then between these two, I mean, very competitive for that top spot. But I think I enjoyed Dumb Money just a bit more, so Flora and Son is in third. But at the top of this list, maybe the most surprising number one of the year so far. I what would the over-under be on me betting whether or not Saw X would be at number one on my list, man? This is so shocking. And all in all, at least I avoided a lot of the bad movies. September was a pretty good month, even though I was underwhelmed by a lot of the bigger films, but Saw 10. What is happening? Thanks so much for being here. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, I will be reviewing Loki Season 2. I can't wait.
So, you've come back for your city.
No, I came back to stop you.
When Gotham is ashes, then you have my permission to die.
That's not how he says it. That's how I'm saying it.